Well, joining us now to unpack today's crime statistics is law professor Alex van den Heever from Wits University. Very good evening to you, Professor. We thank you very much for your time. You know, just having a look at that clip alone, political party leaders describing it as painful, also describing it as not unexpected. Essentially, what was your initial reaction and alarm that had been brought forward by these statistics released today?
Well, on the one hand, our statistics have always been high, and we're not seeing any change from that. So on the one hand, that's why it's not entirely alarming. We do see some percentage changes and increases in certain violent crimes that are clearly problematic. But the concern is really that the overall picture that looks endemic for quite a while is extremely bad and is suggestive of underlying causes as well as the statistics themselves, but the underlying causes in our society are not being addressed.
Yeah, let's have a look at some of those contributing factors and having a look, increased drug possession being on the rise, there being one of the top of the list, as well as illegal firearms and people being in possession of those illegal firearms. Bank robberies also increasing on average by an 8 percentage percentile.
Well, one of the problem statistics today that was I noticed in Business Day was that the banks are reporting that these statistics are inaccurate and that they are underrepresenting the number of crimes against banks. And this, to me, is a problem. If those statistics are wrong, how wrong are the other statistics? And they are significantly out, so that needs to be checked. So on the one hand, there's a question as to the scale of what is being reflected at the moment is problematic, but it is potentially underrepresenting what is wrong in society. And what is wrong in society is probably derived from our very extreme rates of inequality, unemployment, and socioeconomic circumstances, extreme disruption to society and households and communities, of which we can look at the police stations to identify which communities are under most distress.
Yeah. You know, in terms of that, in terms of our law and bringing people to book, let's just discuss driving under the influence of alcohol. It's also increased exponentially despite having police visibility on the roads during festive season, despite all these campaigns that have been rolled out saying that drunk drivers are going to be arrested. Still also there seeing huge increases. Does this not then bring us back to the book of law and having to look at criminals actually being charged and actually having sentences that, you know, drivers would actually fear getting arrested and staying in jail for?
Well, I think there are certain crimes which are susceptible to improved policing and the improved efficiency of policing, and there are others that are not. So, yeah, in the case of drunk driving, potentially that would see an improvement if there were an improvement in enforcement and a more systematic approach to dealing with that kind of crime. But that is not necessarily the kind of crime that's leading to the murder rates, the break-ins at households, the fact that many communities essentially can't be safe at night because they don't have access to ADT or to some kind of extra security protection. So we have a big problem in that a lot of people, because of their socioeconomic circumstances, are vulnerable to crime, and we also have people who are causing crime because they themselves also have been vulnerable to socioeconomic conditions.
In terms of community participation, we've heard the call from Becky Cele calling for the community to assist police and report these crimes. Are we actually seeing a trend in some of the crimes that are being reported? For instance, a domestic abuse where you know, someone will go and report the case, but then later it's actually being withdrawn.
Well, you are going to have those kinds of cases. So again, I would look at whether or not that kind of feature, that kind of occurrence is the cause for the high crime rates that we have in South Africa. South Africa already has one of the highest prison population ratios in the world. So putting more people in prison is not necessarily going to change this scenario. We're already doing that. And potentially when we look at the gang violence that is endemic in the areas of the Western Cape, where we see the highest crime rates, that is because of gang-related violence that is endemic and built in and entrenched into those communities and their relationships to the prison populations, which is not being addressed in any way by any kind of proper program today in South Africa. So on the one hand, that's causing crime, but it's predictable, one knows where it is, its location, and yet very little is being done to change the causes of crime.
When you say location, what do you mean?
Well, you're going to have, so we could see where the crime statistics are highest, the murder rates, the rape rates, etc., are extremely high in certain areas because that's where the police stations are reporting the crime. Those, when you look at them, they're very closely, the areas in Cape Town, for instance, are very closely tied to the communities who are often arrested from gangs, who are then in gang populations within the jails and the prison system. And they're the ones most responsible for that high crime rate in those areas. And all that's happening is that you've got people circulating between the community and prison and nothing changing. So where it's indicated that large part of these serious crimes are gang-related, then you have an endemic problem. You've got to break up the gangs, and you've got to break up the reasons why people form themselves into gangs, and there are a lot of reasons why that happens in the Western Cape.
Let's also just discuss then the transformation, it seems, that needs to take place within South African policing.
Well, I think on the one hand, we can, as I said, improving the quality of policing is one feature that could make a difference. If one is assuming that putting more people in jail is going to actually solve crime, because people, you know, when they commit crimes, are not thinking that they're going to end up in prison, and they're not even responding to that. They're thinking very short term. So we can improve policing, but we've also got to improve the other social services and support structures for what are essentially very vulnerable communities, which we can identify, which we can see are problem areas. If we have these high crime statistics in Mitchell's Plain, in Nyanga, in Cape Town, then we know that that is a community in stress. And we should actually be focusing a multifaceted strategy around that community, not purely improved policing. And improved policing is part of it. But the police minister was talking about improving police to population ratios. If you've got a corrupt police station, improving police ratios is not going to help much. So the issue is you've got to ensure that your police services are clean, but you've also got to make sure that you've got a multifaceted approach for communities that are in distress, which are identifiable.
Again, shocking numbers around domestic cases being reported, as well as sexual offences against women and children. Yeah,
so again, that is an underreported statistic. So those are statistics that are being revealed. Those are the only ones we see. So we know that a lot of domestic violence is never reported. Probably considerably more than is actually reported. So we can't always tell whether the change in statistics is purely improved reporting for a period, or whether there is something changing in society. My concern is that, in fact, we have a deep problem on that side, and we're only seeing a very small part of it in these statistics.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. That was law professor Alex van den Heever from Wits University on the crime statistics released today, just in discussion around some of the trends and problems, as well as some of the statistics that are said to be underreported by banks, and now questioning the credibility thereof. Do stay tuned. You're watching SABC News. This is News at 9. We take a short break.